back, listeners, to Not Just Any Other Story. This is Anita Capri. I'm so happy you joined us here today, and I am so excited that I have finally have my great friend Corinne here with me today. Oh, you could probably hear the fire crackling in the background. We have a nice fire going here. We're at the cottage, cozying up in front of the fire because it's kind of a yucky, misty, rainy day, so we decided to build a fire. So if you hear those crackling sounds in the background, that's why. Anyway, Corinne, all the way from New York.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's wonderful to be here. It is a gray, misty day, but thank God we have the fire. The chill is out of the air.
Chill is out.
Mm-hmm.
And in case you forgot, I think I mentioned this earlier on in the podcast that Corinne, the character of Tilly is based on Corinne. She's a lot like you. You probably recall anyway. So we're going to start with, before I actually start with the chapter, I wanted to remind everybody, please rate and review. I hate saying that over and over, but please do so that we can get the podcast up there in the rankings and make it accessible to more people. So, Corinne, you are holding the book right now, and we're at chapter 42. Would you mind reading?
Sure. Chapter 42, Dr. Lucas. It's funny how when you have an idea that seems absolutely brilliant, especially when you're tired, it seems totally ridiculous the next day, and you're forced to ask yourself, what was I thinking? Not only did I think that trying to make Les jealous was stupid, but extremely immature and shallow. When I stood in the shower the following morning, the hot water cascading down over my head, I began to feel inwardly disgusted with myself. I couldn't believe that I had stooped to such measures. By breakfast, I considered it a fleeting digression that would take its rightful place in the furthest recesses of my mind, labeled Bad Decisions You Want to Forget. How I ended up on Air Canada Flight 1407, headed to Orlando 4 weeks later, is something I still can't fully explain. I never followed through on the plan of going just to make Les jealous. Nor did I submit to the incessant coaxing of my co-workers and Moira, who went so far as to give me a guide to Disney. Perhaps it was Les himself who convinced me to go. His indifferent attitude when I inadvertently mentioned the possibility of going to the conference made me feel indignant. There seemed to be no point in staying since he was going to be showing Harry off to his relatives anyway. Or maybe it was Cam's friend Lucas, who, to my surprise, was nothing like I pictured him. He had strolled into the clinic one evening just a few days before Christmas to see Cam. I thought he was a new client who'd come in to make an appointment. As soon as he spoke, I sensed an aura of warmth and familiarity about him. He reminded me of Cam, and I understood immediately why they were good friends. Though confident and very attractive, he had kind eyes you could get lost in. He was also a little older than I'd imagined, or at least older than I was. I guessed him being in his mid-40s. He was tall and lean and had traces of gray peeking through his jet black hair. When he introduced himself as Lucas Valli, I quickly realized that this was the Dr. Lucas who needed a replacement companion for the conference. It had suddenly become an acute possibility again. Not that I was looking for new love, but the thought of a distraction in the form of a handsome, mature fellow professional seemed somewhat appealing at the moment. So there I was, sitting next to this lovely man, 20,000 feet in the air, having a pleasant conversation that made me feel just a little alive again. Lucas turned out to be one of those people who has a way of making you feel as if you've known him your whole life, however briefly you've actually known him. His quick wit, friendly manner, and welcoming eyes reminded me of my father. Despite this, coupled with the fact that he was not married or presently involved with anyone, there was no romantic fireworks, at least not on my part. I was very thankful for that. It had made the 3-hour flight quite enjoyable and free of those sexual tensions that always accompany spending time with a prospective lover. As a result, I was able to relax and be myself and laugh when Lucas would make little jokes about his random observances or tease me about my odd flying habits, such as picking the polish off of my nails or reading and rereading the emergency flight manual. It was all quite refreshing. When we arrived at the hotel, it seemed that every veterinarian and technician from every animal hospital across North America had attended the conference. We waited 20 minutes just to check in and another half hour to confirm registrations for the workshops we'd signed up for. Then, as my incessant whining about not having a good cup of coffee since we left Toronto became unbearable, Lucas kindly went in search of a Starbucks or its likeness while I held our place in line. Once I had my caffeine fix, I was ready to explore the exhibits and seek out opportunities for fun. Lucas and I chatted excitedly about the various speakers and entertainment at the venue. I was thrilled we got passes to visit one of the Disney theme parks. As many times as I had been in Florida, I had yet to explore Epcot Center, and my chance had finally arrived. In the queue, we met few other people from Toronto. Sam, Rebecca, and Alexander, who had arrived earlier that morning. Sam and Rebecca worked together at the Toronto Humane Society, and Alexander was a rookie vet from London, Ontario. Though he just met the other two at the conference, they all appeared to be best friends already. As we made the connection with hearty handshakes and invitations to join each other for lunch, I couldn't help but notice how easily we could forge friendships with complete strangers just because they happened to be from our hometown. And yet I was not nearly as open to planning every free minute with my new acquaintances as Lucas was. I was glad to have a couple of hours before the keynote speaker would be ready to kick off the conference. It was just enough time to have a little rest and then a quick shower. But my plan was cut short by a gentle knock at my door 20 minutes later. "Just a second," I called out as I looked around frantically for my pants, which I had dropped somewhere on the floor. When I opened the door, Lucas was standing there wearing a pair of shorts and a golf shirt that was a very soft periwinkle blue. It complemented his sapphire blue eyes, which were really beginning to grow on me. "Did I disturb you?" he asked. When I glanced at myself in the mirror from across the room, I noticed a chunk of hair at the back of my head sticking almost straight up. "No, not at all," I answered, smiling. He smiled back. "I just thought you might want to get a little something to eat before we get started. They have a huge spread downstairs." His eyes lit up with the mention of food. I couldn't refuse the invitation, so I asked him to wait for me in the lobby. I would have to shower, get dressed, and fix my hair, which had turned into bedhead for a mere 20-minute nap. As I showered, I recalled Lucas standing there at my hotel room door like a kid, asking his pal if he or she wanted to come out to play. Despite how handsome and sure of himself he was, he had a charming way of looking at life that made him seem so much younger than he was. He was certainly a catch. I couldn't imagine why he'd never been married. He didn't seem like a swinging bachelor type. Then I wondered if perhaps before the week was out, I would have an answer to that question that had drifted casually in and out of my thoughts since the plane ride was over. I put on a jean skirt and a sleeveless white linen blouse. It felt wonderful to dress in clothes that were airy and light, anything that reminded me of summer. Although it wasn't July, the temperature was in the high 70s, a far cry from the below freezing temperatures of our Canadian winters, a season which I had never been fond of. As I stepped out of the elevator and into the lobby, I spotted Lucas right away. He gave me a tremendous smile when he saw me, like old friends meeting after a long absence. Just as I was returning the smile, I felt my legs suddenly go right out from under me, and I landed on a hard, slippery marble floor. As I was falling, I caught a glimpse of a big yellow wet floor sign. As if that were not embarrassing enough, I slid across the marble floor until my little jaunt was cut short by a pair of hairy legs which became grossly entangled with my own. Somewhere along the way, I knew the side of my head had scraped up against something sharp and unforgiving. Yet despite the distinct pain that seared across my forehead, all I could think about was, "Get those hairy legs away from me." I was sitting up by the time I realized my skirt had ridden up to my waist and that I'd slid right into a man who was holding a tennis racket and wearing very short tennis shorts, which would explain the hairy legs. I felt suddenly like I was going to pass out. Lucas arrived just in time to hold me steady while he knelt beside me on the floor. Then I felt a trickle of something warm and wet rolling down the side of my cheek. When the bright red liquid began dripping onto my white blouse, I realized that the situation went beyond embarrassing to complete and utter humiliation. I knew I had cut my head open on something, but no one wanted to tell me which part of the hotel decor had done the damage. By the time an ambulance arrived, my head was throbbing considerably and a crowd had gathered around me, including our famous keynote speaker. Apparently, the renowned vet, researcher, and author included my little mishap in his opening speech. It was repeated word for word to me later by my fellow Canadians. I don't know why they called an ambulance for a little lady who tripped in the lobby, he'd said. Just because we stitch up animals for a living doesn't mean we can't do the same for the hotel guests. His impromptu joke was received with uproarious laughter. And later, as my colleagues were congratulating me on my newfound fame, I decided that I did not want to be famous, ever, especially as the butt of someone's joke. At the hospital, I received 4 stitches on the side of my head. Lucas sat with me the whole time and was impressively calm. He hadn't said anything about how awful it was when I tripped or how bad he felt that this happened to me. He just reassured me that I'd feel much better tomorrow and that there'd be little, if any, scar left when it was all healed up. I appreciated that he didn't make a huge fuss because I would have felt like more of an idiot than I already did. So I just closed my eyes and winced as little as possible while I was being sewn up. It was 4 hours later when we arrived back at the hotel just around dinner time. I insisted that Lucas join the others for dinner and then later at the comedy club where many of the guests were going. I was craving sleep anyway with the help of some painkillers that had been prescribed. Lucas agreed to go reluctantly and left me around 9 o'clock to take part in the festivities. He checked on me twice by the phone and then at midnight when he came in, all the while apologizing for waking me up while insisting that he had to make sure I was okay. With each phone call, I would begin to think about Les and wish that it was him who was being so attentive. But it wasn't him, and that was the reality. As groggy as I was thankful that someone was looking out for me. I felt reassured by Lucas's concern and by the sheer fact that there was someone in my life, someone in Florida on that particular night who really cared about me. Maybe, I thought to myself, I am going to be all right after all. Then suddenly, as if a boulder of enormous weight had been lifted from me, I began to feel optimistic. I wasn't sure whether it was the painkillers or Lucas who deserved the most credit for that, but I felt so sure at that moment that I would somehow make it through my heartache over Les. Perhaps it was true what Moira always said, that we need to laugh every day and cry only sometimes, that was life's balance. It was only when Lucas came to my door at midnight, banging on it until I woke out of a dead sleep, that I truly understood what she'd been talking about all of those years. As soon as I'd opened the door and looked into his compassionate eyes, I sensed that even if it took a long time, I would be able to laugh and love again the way I used to. To hell with the shopping cart people, I thought to myself as I lay in bed. To hell with all of them. We far outnumber them anyway. And to hell with Les, I said out loud just before I made my final descent into the peaceful, carefree world of slumber.
Okay, so
There's so much in the character when I read it again that reminds me of the little things that I know about you and the way that you think and the way that you act and your reaction to things. Yes. Just reading it again made it so clear that the character is you.
Really?
Yes.
People have said when they read it, they can see me.
Yes.
Like what?
100%.
Wow, I didn't think it was that obvious.
I don't know. Now I have to go back to now you want me to reference the chapter?
I'm just curious. What is it exactly that makes it sound so much like me? So now if people read the book, they're going to be like, this is Anita. This is the author writing about herself.
Maybe.
I think she's a lot nicer than me. What did you say?
Only the know you.
We have a little commentary here from Jacob, who is saying only if they know you, they can make that. That's true, Jacob. You're
That's true.
absolutely right.
Yes, you have to know you as a person.
But now that you've said that, now people like who listen to the podcast can be like, oh,
Oh,
so
yeah,
the
they're-
whole time she was talking about herself.
I mean, even the little things that you say here, I can reference the chapter,
Okay.
which is, the how much you hate Canadian winters.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You know, how much you love the heat, how big of a klutz you are, because you are a klutz.
Yeah, that's
I mean,
for
you
sure.
have more bruises on your body than a heavyweight champion. Just again, little things, even the way that you write and just the whole cadence of the craft of the writer is you.
Really? Nobody
Yes.
has ever commented on the style of writing.
No one knows reading and writing workshop like we do, honey.
Sure. That's for sure.
That's it. Like
Yeah.
when you know those things and you study authors
Yeah.
and you know what authors are like, it's definitely your voice
Yes, for sure.
as the author.
Yes. People have said that when they're reading, it sounds like me talking. Like they can hear me saying it.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
I definitely think that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what's so funny is that it's ironic that you chose that I read this chapter, A Conference to Florida.
Yeah.
And I remember going as myself to a conference to Orlando.
Really?
Because Glenn said, all right, let's go somewhere warm. To hell with the cold weather. Let's just pick a warm place for a conference. Who cares what it is? It ended up being a conference for psychologists and psychiatrists, which we knew nothing about. And so we ended up going to, and it was at Disney, 5 minutes of the conference. And then we started going through Disney, and it is my least favorite place on the planet. I mean, I remember going as a kid when it first opened. My parents took me in 1972. And I think I hated it as a little kid because I hated all of the characters. I was afraid of Mickey and Minnie Mouse because I couldn't understand them as like these people are they real? Are they not real?
Yeah.
They seem so creepy.
Well, I'd never been as a child. So I went as an adult when my kids were like maybe 7 and 9, or I think they were around those ages. And number one, I found it very, very expensive. And number two, I just felt like it was hyped up so much. I don't know what I expected. I still enjoyed it. And I have to say, we went to the park. Oh, what's the park with all the characters? And there's a big parade at night with fireworks.
I think that's Disney itself, isn't it? It's not Epcot.
You know how they have the different parks?
Yes, I think it's Disney itself.
What park is that? It's terrible.
Magic Kingdom,
Yes,
right?
thank
Magic
you.
Kingdom.
It was Magic. But I have to say that when we sat and watched this parade with all it was at nighttime, and the fireworks
I'm sure
were
that was
so
beautiful.
amazing.
Yeah, I'm
I
sure that was
actually felt
beautiful.
a little teary-eyed.
Yeah.
Because it was so like amazing.
Yeah.
These fireworks, and I love fireworks. You have to go again to somewhere different
Yeah.
because you don't want to hate it forever.
Well, Jacob wants to see Orlando because he's never seen it. So
Oh, you're gonna have to go.
we have to go. I know. I have to go.
Okay, we'll talk because I know where you should go.
I'm still going to hate it. But anyway, so yeah, I definitely think I see the writer in the pages. I see you as the character.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
I guess I kind of am.
Yeah, I think you are.
It was my first novel too, so it's like
I think you put yourself
you
more
kind of
into a
do.
first
And because
novel.
it's first person, it's like a narrative.
Yes.
It's hard not to put your voice and your
Right.
way of even speaking.
And thinking.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well-
Lucky the second novel is a male character. Is the main character.
That should be interesting.
Yeah, it is. That'll be the third series.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, do you want to go on, read the next chapter?
I guess
What's the next one?
I don't know.
What's it called?
I gotta put my glasses on for that one.
Okay.
Chapter 43. What's going on? Oh, climbing out of black holes.
Okay.
All right.
All right, here we go.
I was relieved that the following day did not entail heavy lectures or workshops that would require far more brain power than I was able to muster up. It was Saturday, and various day trips around town had been scheduled for anyone who'd signed up. Both Lucas and I had been looking forward to a day at one of the Disney parks, especially because we both had an interest in Epcot Center. I'm sorry. We had been discussing it during our flight the previous day and had simultaneously agreed on that particular option. Ugh, for her. We'd also made plans to check out the space simulation, which was written up in one of the brochures. It was just one more thing to love about Lucas. He was game for everything. Before hooking up with him and the rest of the hometown gang, I decided to call Harry on his cell phone, but he had it turned off. When I tried calling Les's place to talk to him, there was no answer again, and the answering machine went on. I didn't leave a message and wondered where they could be at 8 a.m. in the morning. Then I remembered that Les had mentioned staying with his mother for a night or two before she left to go back to her winter home in Florida. Disappointed, I tried not to let it affect my mood. Next on my list was my brother Matt. I knew I would probably wake him up, but I called anyway, anxious to hear his voice and make plans to see him. When he answered, he sounded wide awake. "Hi, Angel. I was wondering when you were going to call. Didn't you get in yesterday?" "Yes, and I meant to call yesterday. Well, I had a bit of an accident," I admitted reluctantly. "What do you mean? What kind of accident?" "Well, I kind of had a fall." "Uh-oh. Need I ask if you ended up in emergency?" "No, you don't need to ask." There was silence on the other end for a few seconds and then boisterous laughter. "I'm sorry for the laughing. Well, is it stitches or a broken bone?" "I'm not telling. You'll have to see for yourself." "Oh my God, Angie. So you really did hurt yourself?" "I'm sorry, sweetie. I was just joking around when I asked if you had stitches. Why didn't you call me? I would have come." "It's okay. I had a friend with me." "Oh?" He sounded intrigued. "What friend? The dude you went to the conference with?" "Yes, and don't start," I said, knowing what was coming next. "Okay, I won't now, but I'm coming over there to get you, and I want every gory detail." I almost interrupted him to explain that I was already booked for the day, but stopped myself. I could not pass up any opportunity to spend time with my brother, even if it meant missing Epcot Center and a day with Lucas. "You know what?" I said excitedly. "I can't wait to see you, Matt." "Me too. Are you sure today's okay?" "Yeah, of course it is. Come and pick me up. I can be ready in 5 minutes." And I fully intended to be ready in that amount of time, but as soon as I hung up the phone, my head began to throb, and I started to become anxious about taking any painkillers, which I knew would make me a little drowsy. Then I began to feel angry with myself for having been so clumsy. I didn't want anything ruining my time with Matt. I finally submitted to the pain, and as I popped a couple of Tylenol 2 into my mouth, I realized that Lucas would be checking on me at any moment before going down for breakfast. I didn't want to tell him that I wasn't going on the day trip. Somehow I knew he'd be disappointed. He'd mentioned a restaurant at Epcot Center that he'd looked up online, and we'd planned out carefully what we would see before and after lunch at the well-known Tutto Italy. When I told him I would be spending the day with Matt, he accepted my change of plans graciously. "That's great, Angel. You should be spending the day with your brother, and maybe take care of that head of yours." He'd given me a soft kiss on the forehead, being careful not to touch my stitches, and then rushed off to catch a bite to eat before the coach bus left. I stood there, leaning against the doorframe, watching him walk down the wide hallway from my room. I was a little taken aback by his gesture, but at the same time, not in the least bit offended. In fact, I found myself being drawn to him more and more. It's going to be a good day, I decided, a very good day. Matt arrived just 30 minutes after we'd spoken on the phone. By the time the Tylenol had kicked in and the throbbing in my head was down to a light tapping. "Wow, you really did have a good fall, didn't you?" Matt examined the stitches that were now almost completely disguised by the big bruise that had formed underneath and around them. "Are you sure you're up for doing anything?" he asked, now looking uncharacteristically serious. I showed him the bottle of painkillers and shook it with a smile. He nodded his head, laughing. "Well, okay, let's go then." "Where are we going?" I suddenly felt giddy at the thought of having Matt all to myself for the day. "Well, certainly not where I planned." There was an obvious sarcasm to Matt's response. "Which was where?" "I was thinking of one of the parks. Epcot. I know you haven't been there." A guilty chuckle escaped me. It seemed I was destined to stay away from Mr. Disney for the day. "I don't think a crowded place like that would be such a good idea in your condition," he continued. "But not to fear, sis. I have just the therapy you need." Matt was always full of surprises. He could change plans without a second thought if he knew that it would please whomever he was with. This was one of his more endearing qualities, and it had been just that which made him so much fun to be around. Spontaneity was a natural instinct for Matt. So much so that if you weren't the type of person who could handle doing things on a whim, life with Matt could be almost unbearable. I'm sure this was at least part of the reason for his marriage coming to an end. His ex-wife, Caroline, was as rigid and set in her ways as Matt was carefree. Always a comedian and adventurer, he was not to be tamed so easily. But contrary to what everyone thought, it was Matt who had wanted to take the plunge and start a family, while his better half decided that she needed time to carve out a new career for herself. What her plan really meant was that she wasn't interested in having children at all, and it hadn't taken long for Matt to realize it. Despite this, he had held out for another year, and when he finally decided it was time to leave, she'd already started seeing someone else. Mac talked about it at great length over breakfast. I was engrossed in every detail of his rocky marriage as we sat glued to our fancy chairs in the posh La Boheme restaurant somewhere in the heart of Orlando. As his tale came to an end, he let out a huge sigh. I realized that it was the first time he'd ever told me the whole story of life with Caroline. I knew it wasn't easy for him to talk about his personal life. When he'd been home for a few months earlier, he had told us all very little about his breakup. He just skimmed the surface. I was touched that he had opened up to me, and it seemed almost as if he'd waited for such an opportunity to get all the messy details of his breakup out into the open. I'm glad you shared, Matt, I said, holding his hand and offering a sympathetic smile. He just nodded and looked down at his plate. He looked so fragile at the moment that I didn't know whether I should change the subject or just sit in silence. He squeezed my hand and raised his eyes to meet mine in a knowing stare that I will never, ever forget. It was Matt in the raw, without a joker's hat that was so part of his personality. Then, as if he were afraid that this moment of truths would pass, he asked, "What's going on with you, Angel? Why aren't you with Les? Why aren't you two together?" My mouth opened, but before I could answer, he said, "And don't give me that crap about putting your relationship on hold for Harry." My eyes widened, and I found myself at a loss for words. It seemed he had figured it all out. It was my turn to breathe a heavy sigh that felt like it was coming from the deepest part of my soul. I was still looking at him and sensing that there would be no pretending of any sort where my feelings and fears were concerned. "I love him, Matt," I finally said, a glassy film forming over my eyes. "I know you do. He doesn't want me anymore." I could barely get the words out. It stung as I said them. "How can that be?" he asked. "I saw him. I watched him. He's definitely in love with you." I wanted so much to believe him. I knew that he was convinced of what he was saying, but he hadn't been there to see the resentment and the anger in Les's eyes when I explained why I had never told him we'd had a son together. Nor was he there to see how Les avoided me at every turn, and when he had to be in the same room with me, how he tried not to look at me. It felt like hatred, not love. "He's very angry with me," I admitted. "I don't know if he'll ever forgive me." "Sweetheart, he has to forgive you. You're the mother of his son, don't forget. And when you're not crying, you're really cute." In between the tears that began to make their usual descent down my face, I found myself giggling. I rifled through my purse for tissues. I settled for wiping my eyes on the end of my napkin, and as I did so, I wasn't sure whether I was soaking up tears of sadness and regret or tears of relief at finally having shared the worst of my fears with someone. Matt was leaning back in his chair, satisfied that he'd single-handedly freed us both from ourselves, pulled us out of our black hole of depression. When the waiter arrived with our check, it was as if Matt had sent a psychic signal to him that it was okay to approach our table. When I looked at Matt, he was still grinning. I wondered to myself as I smiled back with love and appreciation what other magic he would weave into our day together.
That's the end of the chapter.
Mm-hmm.
I like Matt.
You think Matt's Vincent?
Yeah, he's kind of like my brother. He's got a lot
Yeah.
of my brother for sure. The goofiness.
The goofiness.
And always laughing at everything and trying to like make it light.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is great.
Right.
It's a great quality to have, right? 'Cause you don't want to. It's nice to be around people like that.
Right. But Vince can be also serious when he has to be.
Oh,
and
definitely.
caring and compassionate and
Yeah.
there for you.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I should have had him on this podcast.
Yeah, you should have.
I don't know why I didn't.
I don't know. I think you should read. Think you should get Vince to read a part with Matt in it.
Yeah, you should. I should.
And then ask for his opinion. I think it would be interesting. It would be insightful.
Yeah.
To see if he sees any of his own characteristics in Matt.
I think you're right.
Yeah, I
Okay.
do too.
All right.
I think
might
you
have
should
to
do it.
redo one, or just have him on as a.
Yeah.
And you know how they have in the back of books appendices?
Yes.
It'll be like a
Yes.
podcast appendice.
Yes.
Or
And
appendix,
here
I should say.
is
Yeah. Cool.
Vince.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me.
Are we gonna read one more chapter though?
We are.
Let
Another
me see.
chapter.
Let me see.
How much is left? How much do you want me to read?
Well, I have to, because I know. Okay.
44 is Deja Vu.
Yeah, I think we're reading that, but I can read it if you want.
Okay, you read it. I'm tired of
you
reading.
sure?
I want to listen to you read. I want to be read to.
You want to be read to?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like when we were kids?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of cool. Okay, hold on. I'm going to find my spot here. Chapter 44, Deja Vu. I thought you might like to visit your favorite department store, Matt suggested as we pulled out of the parking lot of the Grand Bohemian Hotel. Though I had to agree with Matt that shopping at Marshall's was the preferred activity. Sorry, I'm laughing because that's what you and I do whenever I'm in the States.
Yep.
Now they have Marshalls here, so I don't need to do that as often.
Mm-hmm.
But okay, I have to read that sentence again. Though I had to agree with Matt that shopping at Marshall's was a preferred activity every time I crossed the border into the States, I just didn't have the inclination that day. Matt came up with a better plan, something that wouldn't involve too much thinking or exercise. So we went over to his place, sat out on the patio by the pool, and vegged. We talked for hours, and as we flipped through magazines and sipped on iced tea, I kept thinking that it was one of the best afternoons I'd had in a long time. I cherished every single minute with my baby brother. Matt dropped me off at the hotel at about 9 that evening. Though he tried to coax me into staying at his place overnight, I knew that I would have to be up early and didn't want to force him out of bed on his only day of rest. When I arrived, the lobby was full of people who had just returned from their respective day trips. There were smiles on everyone's faces and the hubbub of loud voices and laughter as everyone lined up for the elevators. I felt a little out of the loop, but not in the least disappointed that I had not taken part in the day's tours around town. I didn't see Lucas anywhere, but before crawling off to bed, I called his room to let him know I was back, as promised. He wasn't in yet, so I left the voice message that I would see him bright and early the following morning at breakfast. Then I fell asleep as soon as my head hit the pillow, oblivious to every voice, creak, rumble, and bang that made its way through the busy corridors of the hotel. The next day was a full venue. First, there were presentations on the latest breakthroughs in laser technology and echocardiography procedures used in animal clinics. I found it amazing how much had changed in veterinary medicine even since I'd graduated a couple of years earlier. And I realized that there was so much more to learn in my field. It was a lot to take in, but with the painkillers reduced now to regular Tylenol, I was a keen audience. Before and after the speaker's segment, a number of people approached me and asked how I was feeling. I guess it was inevitable, because although I was able to hide most of my stitches with my hair, the bruise, now a deep purple, was not concealable and stretched halfway across my forehead and down my right cheek. My celebrity status as the hotel klutz preceded me, it seemed, and continued to do so for my afternoon workshop on feline imaging. By the end of the day, I was completely finished, but I felt great about all I'd learned. I made a point of thanking Lucas for the opportunity once again. "Don't thank me," he'd said when we met for dinner. "Thank Cam. He's the one who suggested you should come to the conference." Although it hadn't been Cam who'd convinced me to go, I agreed with Lucas and decided to call Cam at home that night to thank him. I made a point of telling him how phenomenal the conference was. To my surprise, he already knew about my accident on the first day there. It seemed that gossip extended beyond the confines of Hollywood tabloids. The following day was our last. I had one more workshop to attend. I was grateful that Lucas had signed up for the same one on soft tissue surgery. It was a much longer session, but very informative, and it seemed to have left me with more questions than answers by the time we were done. Poor Lucas had to endure my questions, which I kept whispering to him while we listened to the instructor, but he seemed to know all the answers. I was impressed not only with his patience, but with the vast knowledge he seemed to possess on the intricacies of this type of surgery. When we arrived back at the hotel, we had a few hours to spare before the big dinner bash in the ballroom. It was a black tie affair. I couldn't help but feel a little excited about getting all dressed up in a fancy ball gown. Because of my last-minute decision to go to the conference, I'd borrowed a beautiful long silk gown from Bev. Unfortunately, she was a good 6 inches taller than me, so I had to borrow a pair of shoes with heels that were much too high for my taste and ability. But alas, I had no choice. I warned Lucas that he would have to escort me very carefully from my hotel room right down to the dinner table, just as a precaution. The dress was a steely blue color, a perfect match for my blue-gray eyes. The shoulder straps reached halfway down my back, where they were each attached by a rhinestone loop to the rest of the dress. In the front, the straps were gathered and sewn to a piece of sheer fabric just below the neckline. As stunning as the dress was, it was this one detail that caused some serious hesitation about wearing it when I'd first tried it on. This inch thick sheer silk that separated the straps from the low cut bodice was just revealing enough to make someone who was used to being covered up just a little self conscious. Tight to the waist, the dress then flared out to a long flowing skirt that reached the floor. When I looked at myself in the mirror, I had to admit that it was the most beautiful dress I'd ever seen. And though I knew that it would have been breathtaking on Bev with her long legs and dark hair, there was a little voice in my head telling me that I didn't look half bad. It was 7 o'clock when Lucas arrived to take me down to the ballroom. His expression when I opened the door was enough to convince me that the little voice in my head was perhaps a little too modest. He did the once over and he didn't try to hide it. Then, boasting like a true gentleman who was tickled pink about showing off his date, he said, "How lucky am I?" I was glowing. It felt good to be looked at in that way by someone like Lucas. I promised myself that I wouldn't wish tonight. I would just be. After making it to our table safely, the wine and the conversation began to flow. During the course of the dinner, we were all waiting in great anticipation for the surprise guest to be introduced. This conference seemed to have a reputation for big name acts, and this year had been no exception. Harry Connick Jr. walked across the stage to sing in that lulling Frank Sinatra way of his. As soon as his voice came through the microphone, people began to clap and then dance. Lucas asked for the pleasure of dancing with the prettiest lady here. He certainly knew what to say to convince me to dance with him, especially considering how deathly afraid I was of tripping in the stilettos. To avoid any further accidents, he offered to hold me real tight, just to make sure I wouldn't lose my footing. He was smiling deviously when he said it, and I shook my head, giggling at his obvious attempt to flirt with me. I accepted his offer, all in good fun. Just as we began to make our way around the dance floor with Lucas twirling a little too much and holding me a little too close, I caught a glimpse of something, or rather, someone out of the corner of my eye that made me gasp. Standing just beside the terrace doors, I noticed a man in a dark suit and short dark hair, and a face that could not be mistaken. I jerked my head around just to be sure, and there he was, leaning up against the wall in his usual confident manner. Our eyes met for just a moment, and I whispered, "Lass," just loud enough for Lucas to ask, "What did you say?" I see someone I know," I tried to answer without letting my voice tremble. "Oh, did you want to go and say hello?" He looked at my face and must have seen the shock in it because he stopped dancing and put both hands on my shoulders. "Are you all right?" His expression changed from amused to concerned and then to curiosity. "I'm fine. I'm just a little surprised. Would you mind, Lucas?" My eyes flew back to the wall to search for Les, but to my surprise, he was no longer there. "No, I don't mind at all. Are you sure you're okay?" My voice trailed off. I began to wonder if I'd been hallucinating. I thought I saw someone. Maybe it was my head injury causing me to see things and I was experiencing a delayed reaction. "Why don't I take you outside to get some fresh air?" Lucas suggested as he led me out onto the terrace, his hand resting gently on the small of my back. "I'll go and get you some water or something." Before leaving me, he made sure that I was seated comfortably on one of the outdoor benches that overlooked the pristine grounds of the resort. By that point, my hands had begun to shake, and I was sure that the effects of my head injury was coming on full force. I closed my eyes and tried to take in a few deep breaths. Then suddenly I felt a warm hand on my shoulder. "Angel?" I recognized his soothing, velvety voice instantly. I opened my eyes slowly, and Les was standing directly in front of me, his hands hidden in his pockets, his green eyes curious and seductive. He looked more handsome than I could remember. He was wearing a black suit and a shiny blue silk tie. His crisp white dress shirt hugged his chest, and I couldn't help but picture his taut muscles under all that finely pressed cotton. As I stared at him, I realized that he must have had his hair cut recently. It was very short and spiked up a little in the front, but it suited him and completed his clean-cut, sophisticated look, which was literally taking my breath away. I couldn't speak. There was a part of me that was ecstatic to see him, but another part of me that questioned his very presence at the conference. What was he doing there? Had something happened? Was Harry okay? The questions entered my mind one after the other as I continued to stare at him, dumbfounded. He lifted my chin with his hand and turned my face to the side to examine the patchwork and the bruise which I'd done my best to cover up with makeup. Looks like you had quite a fall, he observed, his hand now back in his pocket. What are you doing here? I demanded, finding my voice again. What do you think I'm doing here? I have no idea. Please don't play games with me, Les. I knew my tone was beginning to sound a little irritated. Is Harry all right? Yes, he's fine. Sorry, just turning the page here. Well then, what? I came to see if you were all right. He sat down beside me on the bench and put his hand on my knee. Your mother got a little freaked when she found out you'd gone to the hospital. How the hell did she know? How did you know? Let's see now. He looked up at the sky as if he were working his way through some kind of mathematical calculation. First your brother told your mom. Then Cam called her and she phoned me in a panic yesterday. She said she tried to reach you all day. Yesterday? She called you? I felt slightly embarrassed that my mother had called Les to check on me. Yes, he answered calmly. I tried to reach you as well. You did? I asked, realizing that I'd turned my cell phone off the day before the workshops. Why didn't she just try to call the hotel? I asked, wondering how it had all gotten so out of hand. It's no matter. I offered to come. I still have a couple of days left of my vacation. I was staring at his face, trying to picture my mother in a panic and Les making arrangements to get to Florida to rectify the situation and assure everyone back home that I was alive and well. I don't get it, I said. Matt saw me. He knew I was fine. Didn't he tell my mother I was okay? He said you were fine, but apparently she didn't believe him. I guess you didn't either since you're here, I remarked, a hint of scorn in my voice. He didn't respond right away. He looked deep into my eyes as if he were looking right through me. Then his gaze wandered from my face, down the length of my dress, and rested on the elegant but sexy heels I was wearing. You don't seem to be in too much pain by the looks of it. The sarcasm in his voice was undeniable. There was an uncomfortable moment of silence that ensued. Then his eyes found mine again and his expression softened. You look very beautiful. His stare left me feeling queasy and euphoric at the same time. The familiar feeling of butterflies in my stomach returned, as they always did whenever he was near me. I did not know what to say. I couldn't even say thank you, because if I opened my mouth, he would notice that I was trembling. I didn't want him to know how vulnerable I was feeling, sitting there beside him, so close to him that I could smell his sweet cologne and feel his breath on my neck. At that instant, Lucas had returned with a tall glass of sparkling water. As he came around to hand it to me, he looked at Les with a glint of suspicion. Hi, he said, holding his hand out to Les. I'm Lucas. Les stood up to shake his hand. Les Grierson. I guess you weren't actually hallucinating, Lucas surmised, turning to me. No. I wondered nervously how the scene was going to play out. Lucas, sensing that it wasn't really the time for small talk, excused himself. Before he left us, he said, I'll be inside if you need me, Angel. I immediately turned to look at Les's face to read his reaction. He looked amused, but any hint of jealousy remained hidden. I'm sorry, Les, I began. You came all this way, and as you can see, I'm perfectly fine. I hoped he would retort. I wanted him to assure me that it wasn't all for nothing, that he was glad he came. Not all for nothing, he said, smiling. Thank God, he does miss me. He does want to see me. Then, before my hopes could get too far ahead of me, he added, I also had business to take care of for my mother. Oh, I tried to hide my disappointment. He let a wry smile escape when he noticed my expression. Then he raised his hand and gently stroked the side of my cheek, just underneath the stitches. His gaze was intense, but there was such tenderness in it that I thought I was going to melt, the only trace left of me a clump of blue silk and high-heeled shoes. I was very curious to see what trouble you'd gotten yourself into here. I was worried about you. Oh, I couldn't hide a smile. I am accident-prone, you know. You think? He was laughing now. Just as I felt myself beginning to relax, Lucas returned, looking very anxious. Angel, sorry to interrupt, but you have to come inside. There's something you have to see. Les and I both looked up at him with questioning looks, and then I could hear voices chanting, getting louder and louder. At first I couldn't make it out, but then as soon as Harry Connick Jr.'s voice joined in over the microphone, it was clear. Hotel Klutz, Hotel Klutz, Hotel Klutz. They're calling your name, Lucas explained, grinning from ear to ear. I was mortified as Lucas took my arm and rushed me into the ballroom. As he did so, he looked at Les and said, I just need to borrow her for a second if you don't mind. Les nodded. He tried to look amused, but I could tell he was frustrated by the timing of it all. I didn't know quite what to do, so I let myself be dragged away. I took one last glance at Les, who was forcing a smile, and when our eyes met, in that flash of an instant, I knew that when I returned, he would be gone. That is the end of that chapter. Mm-hmm. I like that chapter because I like how she, you can tell that she just loves him so much and she's so attracted to him. Mm-hmm. It's like, because she's noticing all these physical things, right? And feeling nervous when he's near her. And anyway,
I think I like her confusion between the two men.
Yeah.
Because now she is so at ease with Lucas.
Right.
And is thinking, maybe this will be my next romance. Yeah. And then boom, her whole world sort of stops in that moment and she realizes, oh no. And then he's back.
I don't know, like honestly, when I was writing this, I don't know if I was thinking, I think I was thinking different things, but I wanted the reader to be like, for instance, you think she's wondering that maybe this will be my next romance. Another person might think, no way. She's just so comfortable with that's exactly what she needed, somebody to be comfortable with that she could actually form a friendship with. So I've had a lot of mixed reactions with people that feel like you. Right. And other people that are like, nope, no way.
Yeah, I definitely see it as them both sort of toying with the idea of being interested in each other.
For sure. Yeah.
And I think because of her, because she truly thinks it's finished with Les, that I think she's thinking of her future with someone else. Yeah. Like when she says, gee, this is the first time I was able to relax or be happy, or I understand now that there will be a tomorrow for me. There will be a future. Yeah. There will be something else beyond this that I have to go through.
So Les had to go and throw a wrench in it yet again.
That Les.
And it's like the other contrast that's, I don't know, somebody else mentioned this and that was the point, was the contrast being she's got this passionate love with Les. Like it's all passion and like, she's challenged and it's like, but she's frustrated with him. And then Lucas is kind of the opposite. It doesn't seem like it's this passion. It's more, this is like her comfort zone, right?
Or it's easy.
It's easy. Yes.
It's easy.
And what's better? Can you have both?
I think you can have both, but I think that you don't understand until, I don't know, maybe you go through a couple of relationships that sometimes like the fire and the passion and the back and the forth isn't in the best thing in the long run because you're always working at the relationship. And when you find someone where it's just easy, then you understand, oh my God, this is how it should be. Right. When you both can fall into the pattern of it being easy and there really isn't that much to work on. Yeah. Like they always say, oh, relationships are so much work. Why? If you meet your perfect partner or your perfect match or a person that perfectly complements you, it should be easy.
I wonder if we're going to have some agreement with that in the background.
What do you think?
We're going to ask Jacob. We're going to ask Corinne's partner, Jacob.
I absolutely shared his
He shares her thoughts. Okay, there we go. he confirms.
Right, because he also knows, those fiery relationships where it's like, oh, you've got to work on it, or then you fight, and then you've got to patch it up, and then you've got to work on it again, or you have to work on, whatever you're working on.
Right.
That's a lot of effort.
Yeah, it is.
That's a lot of effort and a lot of emotional investment. And I will never, ever forget, before I met Jacob, a yoga teacher of mine had met the love of her life, and she had also been through relationships, and I believe she was married and divorced. And I said, that's so great. I'm so happy for you. Like, Andrew's such a great guy. And she said to me, Corinne, it's just easy.
Really?
And I remember the both of us staring at each other, because I was like, wow, I've never heard that about a relationship. That's it's a weird way to describe a relationship. But it's not until you're in one that you're like, yeah, if it's easy, it's just easy. Like, there's no jealousy. There's no, I don't know. It's hard to describe.
Yeah.
Until you're in it. And it's also someone that just compliments you perfectly without it being a lot of effort.
Yeah. And like you said, why should it be? Why does it have to be?
It shouldn't be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So awesome.
Yeah.
Did you like that chapter?
I like that chapter, yeah.
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 A lot of sexual tension there, I feel like.
Yeah.
With Les, not necessarily with Lucas.
Yeah. And then she has to just make her decision.
Yep. And you'll see in the next, there's only 2 more chapters to go.
Yep.
It's the end of the book.
And the end of the book. And the end of your first podcast on your book.
It's going to be my nieces and my sister.
Great.
So it's going to be a bunch of girls commenting. It's interesting because most of the guests I've had are close to my age, some older, a couple younger, but this is this is a different generation that's going to be commenting.
So different perspective.
Yeah. It's interesting with young people. I think you do get a different perspective. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm looking forward to that, but I want to thank you so much for doing this.
You're welcome.
And for your comments and for reading and just for being with me here at the cottage, you and Jacob.
It's been great.
We had a great day today. We went to a town called Wilno. First Polish settlement in Canada.
Very interesting.
Yeah. Been there many times, but I really wanted you guys to see it because of the Wilno Tavern, which is awesome. And
still full.
Still full. We had pierogi and cabbage rolls and schnitzel and kapusta. And then we went to the museum, saw the cathedral. Yeah. Really cool place. So
yeah, it is.
If you're ever in the Madawaska area, what else is near here? Highway 60 going through Algonquin Park on Highway 60.
Right, Barry's Bay.
Barry's Bay area. Yeah. Go see Wilno.
Really makes you appreciate what settlers and what immigrants went through when they first came to this country, and were just handed a free piece of shitty land. Yeah. And had to make the best of it, and how they used their knowledge, tools. Yeah, all of their knowledge from their old country to farm and log, and they knew that sheep would eat anything, so that's what they raised. And
such a hard life.
Yeah.
And it's so cool that we met people from Poland.
We would have cried the whole time.
I wouldn't have survived. I would have been too cold.
Yeah. You would have definitely been.
I would have been freezing. You would have been freezing too. I mean, we're sitting here in summer with a fire. Yeah. Okay, come on.
Yeah. Who are we kidding?
Who are we kidding? Oh boy. Anyway, I want to thank you so much. And I want to thank Jacob over there in the corner for his few comments, but also for giving us a fun time here at the cottage too. And listeners, thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in. One more episode and we're at the finale next episode. So please tune in. Don't forget to rate and review. And have a great, great day. Take care.